Hey folks, this is Sree. Welcome to today's episode of Teflon Tales. As you might notice that the tables are turned today. I've always been a guest in Teflon Tales, and today I've become a host. And my special guest is the founder of Teflon Tales, Ashwin Krishnan. And I'm extremely excited and honored to be hosting him in his own show. So I've known Ashwin for well over 15 years now. He has been my mentor in my career. He's been my go-to person whenever I have a challenge or have a difficult decision to make. He has inspired me in so many ways, not just at the career level, even with balancing life as a human being. So I'm really honored to have him here in his own show and to share his journey with all of you today. So welcome, Ashwin.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks for having me.
Cool, thanks. So I want to start with you always talk about your failures very openly, right? And tell us a little bit about how your journey has been and some of your failures and what have you learned from them.
Okay, so one of the proverbs that I think I read about 2 months ago is if you don't learn to fail, you'll fail to learn, right? And for me, the biggest failure, I took too long, way too long, to embrace that, right? So looking back, I think that was one of my biggest failures, which is the fear of the world judging, the fear of, hey, what if I take a sidestep from my career and I'm unsuccessful, right? What if I have to get back? Is my image going to get sullied? Right? So all of those, I mean, imposter syndrome, the world being a critic, I mean, that was one of the biggest things that held me back for a long time, much longer than I should have. I think the other piece of it is, and you know, and I know, right, which is, hey, networking is something that is very, very important, right? But for the longest time, I misinterpreted the meaning of networking, right? It was about, hey, how many people can I meet? How many people should I know? How can they help me? It was all about the bigger the network I am, the easier it is to find a job or get a speaking engagement or writing an article about so on and so forth. Until about a couple of years ago, I realized it wasn't about me knowing people for my own progression. And once I got over that, which is, it's almost a relief, right? It was one of those things. One of our friends is here. Hey, Sia, good to see you. So yeah. I think it's a hard to describe feeling, but once I got rid of that, okay, the networking isn't about pushing my own agenda forward. It became extremely liberating. And so that was number two, right? Number three is just the understanding over and over again that I got laid off 3 times in my career, right? Yeah. And it took me, the third layoff is finally when I realized that the job isn't me and I don't get defined by the job. And so the failure the first 2 times is despite, and I still remember the first one, right? Literally, we were working together. I remember my colleague and I till 8 p.m. On a Monday evening. And Tuesday morning, we, along with, I think about 50 of us, got called to a conference room. We're told you got to vacate by end of the day, right? So literally, we went from 100 to 0 in a matter of 12 hours. And even that did not teach me that there has to be more than what the job tells you you are.
Yeah.
Right? That identification of the job being me and me being wedded to the job. Now, I do realize that, and this goes back to the Teflon analogy, right? Which is you have to come in every day, you got to get hot, but you got to cool down, you got to stay detached. I think that it took me a good almost 5 decades to get to that point of realization, right? So those kind of, in a nutshell, there's lots more failures, but I think those were the biggest ones that I can rattle off.
Got it. Yeah, being detached, very hard thing to do, right? How do you also be passionate about something and also be detached? Yeah, it takes certain balance to get there. So my next question for you is: I know you took a pivot from the regular corporate job in 2018. I remember meeting you while I was at Facebook. I think we had coffee or lunch together. You were talking to me about finding that right balance, ikigai, if I remember the term correctly. Uh, Tell us a little bit more about what I think you explained what made you switch, and but how did you? What were your learnings, and how is it going right now?
So okay, let me start in reverse chronological order, right? This is the closest I've ever got to ikigai in my life, right? And for the people who are, I mean, who haven't encountered this term, it's one of those visuals that just stuck with me when I first encountered this, I think 10, 15 years ago, right? I think it's a Japanese philosophy. There's four intersecting circles: what you're good at, what they pay you for, what you love, and what the world needs. And so when I say it's as close to an intersection as possible right now. For the first 4 decades plus, it was really about what they pay me for and what I'm good at, right? And that's a good intersection to have, because they pay you for something, you get better at it. But what ends up happening is you lose sight of the two circles that, again, because we have only limited time during a day, is the what you love and what the world needs, right? And I kept putting that off to the side.
Mm.
Oh, I love to do this, I love to do that, right? I mean, I love to write, I love to engage in conversations like this. But that can wait. Why? Because I have to get better at what I am so that they can pay me more, right? So that kind of became, I don't know, we call it a hedonic treadmill, or a or a cycle, right? Not a virtuous cycle, but a cycle nevertheless. um, so one of the biggest things that I had to do, and this was a hard decision, extremely hard decision, because I realized I could not focus any attention on what I love and what the world needs if I continue doing these two intersecting circles.
Yeah.
And I still remember the conversation you and I had at the Facebook headquarters just before I was going to take that kind of leave of absence from my those two intersecting circles. And one of the biggest learnings, there were about 7 learnings. I even wrote an article about that, right? But the first learnings was being okay with the world looking at you and making judgment calls.
Mm.
Is it because I got laid off? Is it because I'm not employable? Is it because I'm seeking a title that I'm not getting, right? Is it because I'm starting a startup? So all of these things are focused on those two things, which is, okay, he's going to get better at something, they're going to pay him more, that's why he's doing this. And I mean, the very few people actually believe me. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to give myself time until I figure it out. Right. And that's not a traditional conversation that you have in Silicon Valley, right? Both of us
Yeah.
live and breathe here. It's
That
not like,
is
yeah, it's like, what are you doing exactly? Right. Okay. And then they dismiss you because you don't fit in the
what's
whatever.
considered the
Yeah.
normal Silicon Valley.
Correct. That framework, right? So so yeah. So I mean, see how you know this, right? You just commented. So the judgment is the first piece, right? The very luckily, for me, right? I mean, this is, we call it karma, call it what on the serendipity, like throw whatever word you want at it, right? But I ended up in this group of people that I'm still closely connected with, called Recognized Experts Group,
Mm.
and Dory Clark heads that. And it ended up becoming my escape vehicle. It was an online group that Dory had just started. I ended up being, I think, in the second recognized experts community. And these were authors, consultants, podcasters, speaking gurus. I mean, everybody that I had not normally intersected with,
Mm.
right? And so it became an extremely safe and non-judgmental place where I could actually open up completely.
Mm.
And like I said, the group is still very, very active, lots more alumnus, and I'm still part of that group, and I'm grateful for that. So it helped kind of offset the balance, right? Because like you said and Sia said, which is, there is a lot of judgment going on. So therefore, where do you? I'm not a saint, right? So my self worth, my self esteem did get hampered a lot. So where do I go for solace, right? So this ended up becoming my kind of place to rejuvenate, to understand, to get a little bit of my confidence back. Right. So that was the second piece. The third aspect is, and I think I told you this, right? One of the things I did early in 2018 after I got out was started this group called IPOP, In Pursuit of Purpose.
Yeah.
And this kind of came back from the whole Ikigai framework. And that group is also, I mean, we call it the IPOPers. There are about 9 of us who are still extremely engaged. It was an interesting group because it was really about helping them understand through my own journey as to what it is that I could help them with, right? And like I said, this group is reasonably active. But one of the ideas I had was, hey, I'm going to become a coach, right? Because I'm helping 9 people, I can help 90 people. It didn't go anywhere, right? But I would not have known that that is not meant for me unless I tried.
Yeah.
Right. So I look back and say, but the group is still. I mean, we just had a meeting of last week, right, with 2 of them, and then we keep in touch. And so the point is, I think it's like what Michael Jordan says, right? It's okay to try and fail. It's not okay not to try, right? And like I said, for me, again, going back to the failures, it took me a better part of 5 decades to get to that point of saying, you know what, I'm going to try. I'm going to try and I'm going to fail, right? And I'm going to try and I'm going to fail. I'm going to try. That doesn't stop me from trying, right? But it took enormous amount of willpower and courage. And like I said, the ability to kind of fall upon people like yourselves, like the Recognized Experts Group, to go back and say, you know what, this is okay. So
I think that, thanks for being so vulnerable, Ashwin. I mean, you've been the most vulnerable person that I've seen. And it has inspired many of us, including myself, right? While I'm making decisions for my career and choices that I have and figuring out how to really balance myself, I think you have changed how I look at things as well. So thank you for that. I want to ask you, like, see, it's a tough decision at a certain stage. Like, you were an experienced, you were like a C-suite executive when you decided, okay, you want to go.
Okay, I feel like running away when you say that.
Excuse me, sorry about that. So not everyone has the option.
Yeah.
Right? They don't have that financial stability, or they haven't even figured out what they should be doing. What's your advice for them to land that ikigai?
Yeah, no, it's a super great question because I encounter this all the time, right? Okay, let me start with one of my posts. In fact, as I was telling you earlier today, I mean, I post so often I kind of lose track of what I posted when I posted. So I went back and checked, and this particular post was, I think, about 3-4 years ago. I still remember the incident so vividly in my mind. It was Pete's Coffee right down the street. I'd gone there and I met an ex-colleague of mine that we hadn't met for about 10 years, right? And we said hello, and I said, hey, what are you up to? He says, Ashwin, I'm 66 years old. 2 of my colleagues passed away in the last month. I have been waiting way too long for making any kind of career change. Life is too short.
Yeah.
I need to make a move right now. And so literally I came home after that conversation and I posted this on LinkedIn, and I've forgotten about it, and I just saw it today. It's got some 80,000 views, right? Which is, I mean, it's not so much about the views. I was looking at the comments, right? And it was really short post, and I had quoted an article from HBR, which really said, why are we so bad at choosing the right job? And I'd quoted the last line, which is really something that shook me up, which is to say, hey, life is short. Don't be afraid to choose the path you want to be on, right? So for me, I think that one line resonated with about 500 people over there. So going back, right? I mean, if you don't want to get to a point in your life where you say, man, I should have made a change, right? Yeah. There is never a right moment, never. You can argue, hey, I'll get my first job, I'll get my first paycheck, I'll wait for my first house, my cars, kids going to school, kids going to college.
It's a cycle, never ends.
Yeah. So no one is going to come and say, hey, Sree, this is the time, do it, right? So yes, you can always, and I did this to myself, like I said, like it took me 48 years to get to the point of saying, okay, I need to do something about it. So yes, there's never going to be the right time, right? Regardless of whether you're Elon Musk or whether you're your first time career job. So how do you? So going back to your question, right? Okay, how do you start giving yourself the permission to experiment a little bit?
Mm.
And at that point, I'd say, I mean, you can. So if you're in a large company, you can start looking at volunteering. In fact, one of my colleagues did that. I mean, he was in engineering, and he used to and start writing marketing scripts because he loved writing. Right, he didn't have enough to do in his job, and as luck would have it, there was a layoff in engineering, and he got picked up by the marketing team.
Mm.
So he built redundancy even while in the same company. Now, would his manager have allowed it, quote unquote? No. Did he ask for her permission? No. Right.
Yeah.
But he told me, it's like, Ashwin, if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have realized now he's in marketing. Right. I mean, so that's a career switch that happened while in his current job building redundancy.
Got it.
But it's incredibly hard to do because why? Again, going back to what Sia just said, the world will judge you. Right?
Yeah.
You're an engineer, right? I mean, what are you doing over here writing marketing? Like, I mean, you can throw whatever buzzwords you want at it, right? But so I think that is super, super important. The other thing I would say is you need to have, like in going back in my case, the recognized experts group, right? You need to have a non-judgmental group that can be your, using a James Bond analogy, quantum of solace. So you need to have a quantum of solace that you can go and actually decompress.
Decompress, yeah.
It cannot be your regular social circle because, like it or not, you're being judged, right? And just like, I mean, myself, I'm judging people too all the time, right? So it's a two-way street. So it has to be with a group that is far enough removed yet closely interconnected that they can understand you, they can feel you, right? I think that's the second. And the third thing is just, I mean, like what we're chatting over here, which is the ability to fail, right? And that is incredibly hard to come by. But once you kind of embrace it, it's the most liberating thing.
Yeah.
Like even this example, right? It's a small example, right? But as of this time yesterday, I wasn't even planning on doing a TeflonTales today because I hadn't got a guest lined up, right? And then last night I got an idea saying, hey, why don't we switch it around and say, I slept over it. I sent you a text this morning, hey, do you want to do it? You said yes. My amazing graphics person in Nigeria, Sunday, it's like 8 p.m. for him. I said, hey, can you create a flyer? He said, sure, I can do it, right? And we switched it around. We're doing it over here. Now, the reason I even bring this up is because there is no one telling me that I should do this, right?
Yeah.
I felt that putting myself in my guest's shoes, having done, I think, 30 of these, right? And you've been a 3-time guest, I need to know what it is to be on the other side. So I am more empathetic to my guests. Maybe I'm not giving them enough room to speak. Maybe I should be giving them a little bit more context about what questions I'm going to ask. I don't know, right? So there was a personal motive for me to get a little bit better at this. But also, like you were saying, hopefully there is a little bit of my own journey that helps somebody else, right? So I said, hey, let's try it. What's the worst that could happen, right? You want to have a great dialogue? That's fine, right?
And it goes back to that one of the essence of TeflonTales being flexible.
Yeah.
Right, and coming up with alternate plans.
Yeah, so if it doesn't work, doesn't work, right? So again, I mean, I think, but I tell you this, right? 2 years ago, I would have not done this, right? Imagine like going live, LinkedIn, like, what does it even mean? What if nobody shows up? I mean, none of that matters, right? I'll tell you, the one other thing I've learned, right, through this whole experience is there is a long tail of consumers who consume content, but they'll never comment, they'll never like, they'll never do anything, but it impacts them.
Lurkers, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, lurkers. And I know of this because personally they've reached out to me, right? I've had at least over the course of the last year, I had 20, 25 people reach out and said, hey, this impacted me or that impacted me. This guest was so good. I said, why don't you kind of come out and say it so he or she will appreciate it? No, I don't want to do that, right? Yeah. So part of that is also for people to realize that there are vanity metrics and there are people with 1 million followers and all that. So you need to know why you're doing what you're doing, going back to the Ikigai.
Got it.
If the why is well understood, then everything else just falls into place, right? And for me, it took a long time to get to that why.
Yeah, good. That's a good segue. You talked about lurkers in social media. I'm one of them. I'm very nervous to even comment on a post in LinkedIn. I'm worried about, okay, how are people going to judge me? Uh, do I really resonate with that message? Is there a hidden line in there? But you've been very successful on LinkedIn. So you've been pretty active as well. So any tips on any learnings that you would like to share?
Wow. Okay. I think so I'll start off with something that might sound a little bit philosophical, right? But
All
what's the
yours.
what's the motivation behind a post? What's the motivation behind a comment? What's the motivation behind a video, right? And again, so for me, it's like, hey, it's cybersecurity related, it's tech privacy related, it's pursuit of purpose related. Those are the only three things, and those are pretty broad, right? So like within that circumference, there's a lot of area I can cover.
Mm.
But man, I tried all kinds of mission statements, right, from 2018 to right now, and this finally hit home just about 7 or 8 months ago, right? So I think the first order of business is: are you posting so that you get 10 more followers the next week? Are you commenting because you can then reach out to him or her for a business need, right? And I'm being blunt over here, but the point is, I think you have to understand the why. If you don't understand the why, then nothing else matters. So that's kind of the first learning for me, which is if you know what you're doing and the why behind that, then it gets a lot easier, right, in terms of the second. And this is the hard one, right? The medium doesn't matter. Like you and I chatting over here, and this happens to be a live show and video, right? But if there's value over here, take this and convert into a text form.
Mm-hmm.
Create an audio file out of it, create a PDF out of it. And I do this all the time. Why? Because people consume in different fashion. And if the message is strong enough, and going back to the why, then you have to be willing to get it out there in every form or fashion.
Yeah.
The third thing is there is a community of folks that you can build. Again, going back to the why. So there's a theme over here, right? If like I have encountered literally this week, I've encountered about half a dozen people on the tech privacy piece because I'm passionate about it, and my posts show it and my comments show it. So therefore, that group continues to grow.
Mm.
And it's a high impact group because things are happening right now with the COVID vaccine passport thing. I mean, yeah, Facebook is already always in the news. What is the impact of that, and how does a consumer relate to that? So for me, this whole cookies and the disclosure on the websites completely drives me nutty, right? So I have a video idea already in my mind tomorrow to put it out there in terms of, okay, it's like how does an average consumer just not hit X when a cookie pop-up shows up? And then they get tracked and they don't even know about it, right? So the whole opt-in, opt-out thing. So the point being, I think the reason for the posting and the why behind it automatically ends up building that community.
That's true.
Yeah, the fourth thing, and again, this is something very personal. Like I said, one of my early failures that took a long time to remediate is the network is not about you. And so for me, it is always, and you know this, right? But for me, it's always about if I connect with somebody and we hit it off and I learn something about him or her, who can I connect that person to? And it's extremely rejuvenating and liberating feeling to be able to. In fact, today I just had a tech cast earlier today, and one of the guests on the show, Samara Williams, she's an amazing person at Cardinal Health, a manager of security, and so I had at the end of it, I said, "Hey, did I connect you with Naomi Buckwater?" And she said, "Yeah, you connected me, Naomi, and she and I hit it off, right?" So that was the highlight of the entire conversation, right? It was a three-way dialogue between Damien Chung, Samara, and myself. But at the end of it, just asking Samara, saying, "Hey, did I connect you?" And she's saying yes, and we hit it off. For me, yeah, I mean
So this
that was
reminds me of
that was a high
Facebook.
point.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
This
So
reminds me of Facebook's mission, helping build meaningful connections. You're doing it already.
but it's also selfish because you know what I mean. Back to the whole Teflon thing. It's like we all need some levitation somewhere, right? Something to lift our spirits. And for me, just connecting people and hearing that they benefited from the connection gives me that lift off. So again, for me, I mean, LinkedIn is like I said, it's a medium. It's a medium to reach people. And I mean, I don't do much of Twitter. I don't do Facebook at all. Obviously, if I'm tech privacy and doing Facebook, okay, that's a different conversation. Um, but it's also important, right? If you're trying to do too many things, right? If you want to be on TikTok, you want to be on Twitter, you want to be on this, there's going back to Teflon, you have to cool down at some point, right? So for me, just this is the medium that I feel most comfortable with. This is the medium that I relate to a lot of people. So I have to keep adapting to it. So I think those are at least my learning so far on this journey.
Got it. Cool. One thing I want to call out is you've been this virtual social graph, or the professional graph that you've built for many of us. It's been incredible. I benefited out of it. I know many. I have gotten connected to so many people who are outside of my own typical self, right? Outside of networking, outside of security, outside of machine learning, the domains. I used to have all my connections used to be very similar profiles, so it helped me expand. So thank you for that. I know we have about 5 minutes. I have two questions, so I'm going to help you manage the time here a little bit. First one is, I think, how do you, like, I think it's like burning both sides of the candle, right? How do you balance it?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, there's no one size fits all over here, right? And especially with somebody doing a solo gig, or an entrepreneur, or even a startup for that matter, right? There is, you can go back to the ikigai thing. I mean, what you're good at and what they pay you for can completely consume you, right? So finding, I mean, so you just mentioned this yourself, right? Finding a network outside of those two circles, right? So going beyond. We were there, I think it was last week, the week before, the panel with Rashmi, right? I mean, she goes out of her way to understand people of a different community, right?
Yeah.
And what does it take? So yes, it takes time and effort, but the ROI in that, in terms of expanding your mind and giving you that quantum of solace to be able to do other things, is tremendous. Right. So for me, just, I mean, I do video editing, right? And it takes time and effort, but it forces me to say, you know what, we had this TeflonTales. There are a few key takeaways that I need to put in succinct form, because not everybody is going to consume a half an hour video. But if I can put it in a 2-minute video, it'll help others, right? So in some sense, I think that effort that goes in those 2 hours versus just doom scrolling or Facebook or Twitter and all that and feeling burnt out is very, very different. So you got to kind of look at what is it that kind of gives you that momentum, that energy to help offset the stresses of the day. That's one. I think the second piece is just look for those adjacencies that allow you to maximize the investment going in. For instance, in my case, I mean, I do these LinkedIn lives once a week. I also record videos and post it. On the business side, I'm also interviewing chief information security officers, chief privacy officers. And so the video editing that we're talking about over here is something that benefits on both sides. So it's an investment cost that's going in, but helping both on the professional side as well on the personal side, right? And again, this going back to the ikigai piece is, if you're and again, this is an evolution, right? Because if initially what you're good at and what they pay you for could be far removed from what you think you love and what the world needs.
Yeah.
But as you
figure it out.
Correct. And so, but as you start iterating that, these circles will come closer together. And as they come closer together, you'll start building that foundation. Oh, if I do something over here, it's actually helping over here. And this might sound a little bizarre, but I was initially taken aback. I had some of my professional connections actually commenting on the TeflonTales and my personal posts. I do a lot of personal posts, right, on the People Pursuit.
Yeah.
So the aspect of saying, okay, so this is your purpose and this is what you need to do from a uh, purpose pursuit perspective. And so I was surprised, like, hey, why is my quote unquote professional network following me, right, on my personal stuff? And then it quickly came to bear because people now, especially now with the digital only universe we live in, people want to see the entire you. There
That's
is no work persona, there is no home persona anymore, right? So in some sense, the effort that's going in to keeping yourself well-rounded is being viewed out by everybody else.
yeah,
And good salespeople always tell you this: people don't buy from what you sell; they buy because of who you are.
yeah,
Right now, that transition from sales to everybody else, including engineers, product managers, CTOs, they all want to know who you are. This goes back to what you just said. They will know who you are if you're okay being vulnerable, if you're okay showing that, hey, you have imperfections outside of your, yeah. So but you're right. I mean, it does take awareness, it does take caution, but then going back and saying, hey, I am going to draw lines over here, and there are certain things you got to stop doing. Especially in my case, once I started doing LinkedIn Live, I stopped doing podcasting. I couldn't do both.
got it.
And that is a cooling down piece, right? So it's hard. It's incredibly hard, especially with personalities that want to try everything.
Yeah,
And yeah, trying, absolutely, right? But trying and saying, oh, I'm hitting the pause over here, I'm turning off the stuff, letting it cool down so that I can actually put more effort over here. I think that it's a hard thing, but again, it's one of
also
those things that, yeah.
yeah, building. I think with experience comes with okay. Hey, when do you quit certain things, or when do
Correct.
you walk away from certain things? Cool, great conversation, Ashwin. Any final thoughts? We are almost on the clock.
Uh, so I'd say just one thing, right, which is you should never ever stop experimenting, right? And I mean, clearly, COVID has taught us that. I mean, there's no industry which is safe, there's no job which is safe. And just like I still go back to my buddy who was in engineering and found a job in marketing when they lay off it in a large company. It's like he experimented. He could have been really bad at marketing. They were told him, hey, your article sucks, but he tried and tried and tried again, and he got better at it, and it actually landed him a better gig. And this is going back to what he loves, what they pay you for, what the world needs, and he's been able to intersect those circles, right? So I think experimenting is probably the key to everything, and that goes back to, hey, non-judgmental, don't worry about the world, see if you're trying to build a network with the thought of helping others, and it'll eventually come together, but there's no easy path.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashwin. This was a great conversation. Thanks for joining us on Teflon Tales. Uh, thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Sree, for an amazing host. Thank you.